Welcome to the 66th episode of the Hail Married podcast. I'm A. Toves, and I'm joined by my husband, the Toves. We're back to recap UTSA's first win over FAU. Let's get started. It wasn't a pretty win, but it was a complete win. UTSA had to overcome self-inflicted errors on offense, but an impressive game on defense and a solid game on special teams was more than enough to secure the win. For the second week in a row, UTSA started out on offense with a long, methodical drive capped off by a rushing touchdown from Robert Henry. FAU was held to a field goal on their first drive, but then disaster nearly struck, as the next two offensive drives for UTSA ended in interceptions. Fortunately, FAU was only able to turn one of those turnovers, a pick six, into points, briefly giving FAU a 10-7 lead in the first quarter. However, the Owls would not score again, as UTSA's defense would impose their will on FAU. The Roadrunners held FAU to 162 yards of offense, caught 2 interceptions, and scored a safety. On offense, UTSA would add 2 touchdown receptions by Willie McCoy and Tyke Ogle-Kellogg, 1 rushing touchdown from Rocco Griffin, and 2 field goals to seal the win, 36-10. The Roadrunners improved to 3-0 in conference play, 4-3 overall. What were your thoughts on the game?
Well, we talked about this being a measuring stick game. You know, that there was this, this feeling of, at least for me, that we really hadn't shown much in the first 2 conference games. Mostly because you have, essentially, when you look at the standings, you have 2 of the bottom 3 teams that we've played to start out AAC play. So, yeah, I mean, of course we should have come away with wins. Of course they should have been somewhat impressive in the way we scored on those teams. But it just didn't feel like this team had yet shown anything. Mm-hmm. Again, always easy to beat up on a bad team, but once you go up against somebody that's more evenly matched, just like you stated in the preview, this felt like it was much more of a, well, Traylor did say it too. He's like, it kind of felt like this was going to be a game in the 20s or 30s, in the 30s. I predicted 24-23. I thought this was going to be a very close game, which Frank was going to be like the difference maker in it. And because of it, I mean, it didn't necessarily, I think, really shine through. I think most of it was probably because he has just more weapons, and he really is just a much better quarterback than Daniel Richardson. But Daniel Richardson really didn't stand a chance because, I mean, he was essentially, him and his dad bod, as you put it, were under pressure from this UTSA front 7 from the start, and he just didn't have a shot.
Yeah, I don't think either one of us expected the defense to play as well as they did against FAU. It was a good surprise to see that. We both thought this was going to be a much closer game because we thought there would be more opportunity for FAU to score. But, Trey Moore and Danye Taylor, again, looked like they hadn't been injured at all. And they just had wonderful games. And because of that, like you said, Daniel Richardson did not stand a chance. And that offensive line that has played very well against other teams just did not hold up.
Right. Yeah, and I think that was a surprising part was, while it was a well-rated offensive line, I don't know, I guess either we overrated it ourselves when we were doing the preview. I don't think we did. I think it was just really that dominant.
Yeah.
Because you look back at UAB's non-existent offensive line and Temple's non-existent line, and you see the difference. You see an E.J. Warner that clearly is much better than Daniel Richardson in just how he torched this UTSA defense. You look back at Jacob Zeno, and he made some good passes in order to get them in the good spots. In this case here, it really looked like FAU on offense, even when we did give them opportunities to make plays, it looked like UTSA from ages ago,
right?
Where we'd be like right within a contest, but then you make one key drop, and it just snowballed, and we got blown out from there. Yeah. And that's the way it went with FAU. I mean, they had a few drop passes that were not Daniel Richardson's fault. You even asked me at one point, was this on Richardson? I said, no. I mean, I don't know how you can put it in a better spot and just not expect the receivers to catch it there. So they really shot themselves in the foot. And one thing that you have to be against UTSA, even when they're not rolling on defense, is the fact that you've got to be able to be efficient on your own offensive end. Because if you allow UTSA to kind of get rolling on offense and continue to just keep your defense on the field, you're in for a long night. And that's really what it came down to this UTSA offense.
It's not like UTSA didn't give them opportunities. I mean, there
were
2 interceptions and a fumble.
Right.
And they really didn't capitalize on those. I mean, obviously they capitalized on the pick 6, but, they should have had 14 points right there, in the first quarter. And then it would have been the narrative of UAB again, except we would have been UAB in that scenario.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's the bigger takeaway here, too, is even though it didn't seem like when we went down 10-7 that they were in control of the game, it still felt like UTSA was in control, mostly because, at least to me, it just felt like the defense was just playing so lights out that you're there's just this is just not going to get out of control. Like, UTSA's offense will figure out what's going on. Frank will snap out of his little funk, and then we'll get back to being UTSA.
All right, before we get into talking about the defense, let's talk a little bit about kind of the crowd size, because when you looked at the crowd for the FAU game, it looked very, very sparse. I think officially they said it was somewhere around 18,000, but it was not an impressive crowd.
Just like Temple. Temple was 18K, FAU 17K. The UAB game that we were watching against Memphis was just really bare. The problem is right now, I think in the American, and what we get fooled into thinking is that you have to have a good home crowd, because most of these teams are not traveling, especially the Conference USA teams. Their fans just do not travel.
Right.
Obviously Texas State travel because they're right down the highway.
Sure.
But, in this case, I think this is where we also need to kind of pump the brakes a little bit on getting disappointed when, it's reported that, a UTSA home game only had 23K. FAU and Temple would kill for those type of crowds. Because, like I said, right now, for UTSA, it was 18K at Temple and then 17K for FAU. I mean, it's just not like...
And they don't have the luxury of having a dome, so that the sound resonates.
Right.
It probably sounded like 18,000, but you put those 18,000 in the dome, it would sound like 30,000.
Right, and I think that's the reason why I just wanted to bring this up, too, about the crowd size, because, we're complaining about the lowest attendance, of the season, but that happens around this point in time. Around October, you get a couple of lulls in the attendance, and then all of a sudden it starts shooting up as we start playing better football, right? But I don't think it's that so much as the fact that you also just don't have, like I said, right now, crowds that travel, and therein lies a problem. But if you're at another school, you wish you had the problems that UTSA is having.
Sure. All right, let's get into talking about the defense. You said one of the keys to the defense was to contain LaJohntay Wester. It seemed like he was a non-factor this game.
I mean, I think at one point we did look at each other and I said, how many catches has he made? And you gave me the stats at the time, and I was like, really? Because even I was confused the entire time about the fact that, he just didn't seem to be in their game plan. But then I was like, well, Lep came through and said, I heard you, Toes, and he figured out some way of, covering Wester. But therein lies the other problem is, we kind of talked about the fact that there really wasn't too many game breakers on the FAU end. And once you took away LaJohntay, it felt like Dana Richardson really had nobody else. And you said it, and this is why I want to bring this up, because you emphasized the fact that he really doesn't throw to many other receivers,
right.
Mostly Wester.
The second thing you said was get pressure on the quarterback. I think it's safe to say that we did.
Yeah, and I mean, you saw what happened. First of all, let's go back to what we just said about LaJohntay, right? He didn't have time to get the ball out to Wester or even find some other wide receiver or even tight end. And then, I'm not going to say he was running for his life because he, seemed to be huffing and puffing a little bit at times, but he couldn't get away. I mean, he's not a mobile quarterback. So, that kind of really leads into me, kind of one of the strengths of the UTSA defense. They don't have to chase a guy around. Man, they look dominant. I mean, look at what we did to E.J. Warner, right? E.J. did get the ball off at times. We fell back into a less aggressive defense. But you noticed that when you're playing more of a statue of a quarterback, this UTSA defense looks amazing.
Yeah, and, particularly on that safety, Richardson laid there for a while, man. It looked like he was rethinking his life choices. He's like, I don't know if I want to get up or just get smacked again.
It felt like he should have been touching his dad bod and going, is everything still there? I don't know. Because, I don't know how many more hits he could take.
He is lucky that he is as big a guy as he is, because can you imagine, E.J. Warner was a super skinny kid. Can you imagine Joe Evans coming at E.J. Warner? I mean, at least, Richardson could absorb more of that. Joe Evans he's a solid guy himself.
I don't know what I would have done if I see Joe Evans coming at me. I mean, I might just throw the ball over in the air and run. Hit my helmet on the bottom of the end zone. But, let's talk real quick some of the stats for the defense. 12 drives, 11 stops in those drives. I mean, essentially, this defense only gave up a field goal. Right. And even then, I kind of felt like they should have made the stop earlier in that drive. Mm-hmm. But, we'll give it to them. They were able to score. But the 2 interceptions, we got the first on both of them. First one for Owen Peewee in his career. And weirdly enough, the first one for Nick Troy Fortune as a Roadrunner. Right. He's been here almost 2 seasons. And it felt like, I thought he had one last year, but
apparently not.
It's one of those things where, you see that there's turnovers. And, I would have incorrectly guessed in any sort of trivia contest that Nick Troy Fortune had already had his first interception as a Roadrunner. This FAU O-line, we've kind of already talked about it, but I'm still stunned just how easily it felt like Nick Booker Brown, Joe Evans, name any name on the defensive line was just kind of shooting through.
Yeah, I mean, even at the end of the game, Ty Leonard had a sack.
Yeah.
They had only given up 9 sacks all year. And in this game, there were 5 with 13 tackles for loss.
Got to give us that Herman post-game quote that you liked.
Oh, yeah. He said, when we did block, we didn't hit the hole right. And I'm not saying that we did that very often, but when we did, we dropped passes. A comedy of errors on that side of the football. We got hit in the mouth and didn't respond. Yeah. That sums it up right there.
Yeah. No, I mean, as much as we want to, nitpick in areas, it's hard to, because I'm not really sure what this defense could have done additionally. Maybe scored a touchdown, but I mean, again, that is nitpicking. I love the fact that it seemed like it was a return to the first 2 games of UTSA defense that was just pinning their ears back, and they just got after a quarterback. And,
I mean, there are a couple more opportunities where they probably should have gotten an interception. I think there was one where maybe Cam Alexander and Rashad kind of collided. But I mean, they were just ball hawks all night.
Yeah, absolutely. Trey Moore, total of 9 sacks this season. He's closing in on Hicks' single-season record of 10.5 sacks. By the way, there are still, 5 games left in the season?
I know, yeah. He just has to get 1.5 more sacks to beat that record. So I think it's pretty safe to say that that record's going down, Clarence.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's talk special teams.
Yeah, great play by special teams. 2 field goals made, mid-30s range. That was the range that Chase Allen missed last game. They didn't give up any big returns, and I gotta say, we got to see Tate Sandell once again tackle someone on a kick return. So, maybe Tate Sandell is going to follow in Hunter Duplessis, Footsteps, yeah. After all, I mean, we're watching in the replay, and I didn't catch it the first time we watched it, but again, we're watching the replay. It was in the 4th quarter, and see, somebody go to tackle a kick returner. We're like, is that Tate? Yep, that's Tate. Yep.
I feel like when he goes to kick it off, he's just kicking it short at times so he can go make the tackle so he can get his, uniform dirty so he can say that he played. Because, I mean, that kid is out racing some of the other coverage guys.
Yep.
And I love it. I love the spark from Tate Sandell. Tate, keep it up, man. All right, let's talk about the offense. Keys to the game, win in the trenches. 43 rushes, 176 yards. They didn't give up any sacks. That pretty much tells you the story of the game. Winning on the offensive line, winning on the defensive line. This, again, this is where I really felt like this was a much more complete game than UAB. Again, an FAU team that seemed just a lot better. And I think, what you said, what you quoted from Tom Herman was right. They got hit in the mouth and they really didn't know how to respond. And, the next key to the game, I said, was a big game from Devin McCune. He's a leading receiver. 5 catches, 64 yards. Look, what I was looking for from him was mostly to make some big plays. And I really felt like he did. Granted, Tyke comes in, catches like a 40-plus yard touchdown pass, which we'll get to here in a second. But Devin seemed like a force early on. When the game was still, early and both teams were kind of feeling each other out with a few kind of like little light punches at each other, Devin was coming through with a lot of big catches. And I think the big thing to take away from that is the fact that Frank didn't hesitate at all to throw Devin's way. That's big. I didn't see him really looking at Josh Cephas. I saw him looking at Devin McCune. And I think that should scare the rest of the AAC, because I feel like Frank and Devin are really starting to get that connection. And look, that interception that happened, we'll talk about again as well too here in a sec. But it just feels like when he's looking for a bigger play, when he's looking for a jolt early in the game, Frank looks at Devin.
Yep. So talk a little bit about Tyke. Apparently, we can only throw 40-yard passes to Tyke. I mean, I guess that's his thing now. He now has 4 touchdown receptions this season. All 4 of them are over 40 yards. He had a 46-yard touchdown reception against Army, 43 yards at Tennessee. I mean, of course, a lot of that was the run after catch, but 40 yards at Temple, and now 42 yards at FAU. Like, apparently it's 40 yards or nothing with Tyke.
Feast or famine.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, to me, that Tennessee touchdown is going to stick out to me because of the fact that just the way he pulled that off. It was unlike a Tyke touchdown that we've seen before. These other ones have been him pretty much streaking down the field, and he catches it kind of in stride and takes it in. That was more of a caught it on a post, stopped, made a move past the defender and went. But look, I'm not taking anything away. I mean, it's impressive to see the fact that we're finally getting to see a Tyke that can really be productive in this offense. A couple of the stats to throw out to you guys. We scored on 6 out of 13 drives. It's less than, UAB, but, one thing to note here is that in the second half, it looked like, and then confirmed by Jeff Traylor in this postgame, that he did kind of let his foot off the gas in the second half. I wasn't a fan of it. I think when it comes to tiebreakers later on, when we're talking about conference title games, obviously UTSA is going to position itself within the next few games and the rest of the season to be able to go to the conference title game. Now, will it host? Will it not? That's still up in the air. But to get to these, some of these tiebreakers, the thing is, SMU, we've talked about the fact that they aren't necessarily going to be challenged very much. Yeah,
they have a cakewalk of a schedule. I mean, really, Memphis is the only team that likely could challenge them.
Yeah, and so what I really feel is that when we're looking at UTSA and how they perform against some of these teams, the reason I really want them to keep their foot on the gas is because the CFP rankings are what's going to determine these tiebreakers. And if UTSA isn't, and I don't want to make it seem like I'm asking them to run up the scores, because it's really not running up the scores. It's you executing your offense, continue attacking. There's a lot of schools of thought, should you continue attacking? Should you be so aggressive? What if we start turning the ball over? There's always going to be questions of how you do what you do, but I don't like what they did in Boca Raton. And the reason for that is because I really feel like if they leave any points on the table and FAU really starts playing better as the season goes on, we could potentially regret the fact that we didn't put a few more points on FAU, a team that, like I said, it was very evenly matched, and I thought this, I can't say it enough. I'm just surprised at how everything went down here. I mean, we'll talk real quick about the running backs. I mean, even split on yards there. I mean, it felt like, 56 yards from Kavorian, 53 each from, Robert Henry and Rocco Griffin. Couldn't ask any more from the running backs. And, it's just, again, putting up more points, keeping the rock going, keeping this, this FAU defense on the field.
So we got to talk about those interceptions with Frank. Okay.
Well, before we do that, though, you did notice that you felt like Frank was sliding better.
Oh, yeah. So as he was running, he was kind of sliding. I mean, certainly he has never been able to slide the way that other quarterbacks can, which has always been problematic with his, knee injuries. But looked like he was trying to slide a little bit, and I know you disagreed with me.
I disagree. It feels like a more of an old man kind of scoot and kind of slow fall to the ground. I mean, he's old, right? We talk about how old Frank Harris is, so why not take a little shot at him?
That's right. I mean 24 is ancient in college football years.
I mean, in college football years, yeah. I mean, he's been there 7 years, right? But I think it's, to really, I guess, to be a little more serious, it is good to see that he's given himself up more.
Right.
Which, it keeps the hits off him. And if he does get hit, there's certainly penalty flags that'll come out.
Yeah, I mean, we've now had the second game in a row where someone has gotten called for targeting against Frank.
Yeah. And, obviously different situations. UAB, he was running. This one, he threw a pass to Devin McCune. But regardless, what I never really liked was the fact that Frank would just... And I don't want to say that it was reckless, because it really isn't. But it's just his aggressive way of running. And he just should have looked for, again, to slide.
Right.
We talked about it for the last couple of years.
Conscious now of not taking those hits and getting hurt.
What sucks about it, though, is it feels like it took essentially an injury to his foot for them to get to this point. So anyway, let's talk about those interceptions. The first one was kind of weird because Traylor immediately after the game said, "Oh, yeah, no, that was essentially on. We ran the wrong route." So
yeah, it was it was on Devin McCune.
Yeah, he ran the wrong route, which is bizarre because it looks like it's just a kind of a streak down the sideline. I mean, unless he's supposed to have the inside position, I'm not really sure what Frank would have been throwing to, because it looked like it was just a bomb down the field. Really, obviously, like I said, I think Devin was supposed to have the inside position, but he couldn't get it when it came, playing against that corner. But usually, and even the announcer said it, you throw on the outside near the sideline to essentially kind of protect yourself from leaving a ball hanging in the middle, because if you leave a ball hanging in the middle of the field, it's going to get intercepted.
Right. I mean, that second one got tipped, popped right in the defender's hands. I get that. Although they had the exact same play in the fourth quarter, and I had to hold my breath because, here you are, you're, I don't know, on the 5-6 yard line, something like that, and you're throwing that same pass to Cephas that just got picked off. But, that one, it worked, and so it was fine, but gave me pause for a minute.
Yeah, and you wonder why it didn't maybe work a little bit earlier, but, there was some things that went wrong during that play, and you kind of wish that Frank at that point didn't get too robotic and just make the throw anyway, because that's what he did against Middle Tennessee, and that's how he got an interception last season against Middle Tennessee, and it got returned for a touchdown, because he just went, to me, was what I call it, robot mode, where he just throws, let's go with the ball, just throws it no matter what. It's like, nah, we'll still figure it out. No, that's not what we should be doing, Frank.
Right.
But all this to say, really, that it's just, there's some nitpicking here.
Sure.
And it was kind of interesting hearing the announcer say that, the defense played great, special teams were great, but there was things to clean up on offense, with Frank here. Sure.
Yeah.
But, did you really feel like that, this offensive performance really needs a lot to clean up on?
No, not a lot. Certainly you don't want to make these kinds of mistakes, though, because had things gone the other way on defense, they might have been costly. But fortunately, we were able to overcome adversity stay focused. And, I think it's a testament to Frank because we've seen him get in these situations where he has multiple turnovers and he gets in his own head and kind of gets in his own way and can't recover from it. And so, that's one of the reasons why I was concerned because this happened early in the game. I was hoping that he could kind of blow past it, stay focused, and fortunately that's what happened.
Yeah, and really, I think to wrap it up, I think we nitpick this on Frank. We nitpick this on the offense, not being as sharp as we would have liked. But man, we're going to take this performance any day because of the fact that you really did have all three phases playing well and in a complete game.
Let's talk about East Carolina. UTSA opens as an 18-point favorite. I think that's being a little generous to East Carolina, to be honest. We've seen several of their games. Most recently, we watched them play against Charlotte, and that was not a great game.
It was an awful game. It was just awful. You think it's generous that they're given 18 points, but let me tell you, East Carolina looked awful against Charlotte. They lost 10-7. Their offense was just abysmal. And Charlotte is running essentially like a high school option offense. They're bad.
Yeah.
Yet they just seem to be much more cohesive on offense than East Carolina did.
Yeah.
And look, I think that's what the bettors are looking at because they saw this performance by ECU on homecoming in Greenville.
Well, I know. That's why I think the point spread should be more like a 25-point spread favoring UTSA, not 18 points.
Yeah, I'm just baffled. I didn't know until we started looking into this how many players they had lost, but maybe you can give us some more on some of the issues that they've been having.
Yeah, this team is struggling. They did have to replace some key players, particularly their quarterback, Holton Eilers, who was a 5-year starting quarterback. He's on the practice squad now for the Seattle Seahawks. So obviously a quarterback who was, playing at a fairly high caliber, and they just have not been able to replace him. They also have a lot of issues on special teams. At the end of the day, they haven't beaten an FBS team this season.
Yeah. They're just not good.
Yeah, and post-game, it was interesting looking at the response of ECU's head coach compared to Tom Herman and his responses to FAU and their loss, because both of them made a comment about finger pointing, and I just thought it was sort of interesting and kind of where their heads are at this point in the season. The ECU coach said, "We're not going to point fingers. Whatever's going wrong, it starts with me as the coach. I have to figure this out." While Tom Herman said, "It's okay to point fingers if someone isn't playing up to standard, but you better have your house in order." So it was just kind of interesting to see sort of where they're at, where, again, I think they're probably in a much tougher situation in ECU and people maybe wanting to turn on each other because, the quarterback play is not working, the play calling isn't working, nothing's working.
Yeah, no, but I think we listened to the post-game press conference for the ECU Charlotte game, and Coach Mike Houston, who's East Carolina's coach, sounded very trailer-like because he said, it's on me. He was down. He was like, "It's on me. I need to have these guys prepared." And, he apologized to the team. It's very, Southern coach kind of speak, I would say. But I would also kind of add the fact that it looked like he just didn't have any answers. Right. And that, there's a hopelessness there when you're looking at the team and going, I don't know what we can do. So let's talk about the offense.
Yeah, it really all starts with their offense. They are averaging less than 20 points per game. They go 3 and out on their possessions about a third of the time.
Jeez.
They are ranked 127th in the nation with an average of 276 yards per game. And again, the big piece to this is because they have not figured out the quarterback play. Instead of going to the transfer portal to replace Holton Eilers, they looked internal. And they had 2 quarterbacks on their roster that I guess they thought were going to be able to step up and just really haven't. So you're going to see 2 quarterbacks play. They've been rotating them, trying to get some kind of spark, but nothing's worked at this point. Mason Garcia is the redshirt sophomore. This is his 4th season. And then Alex Flynn is the other quarterback that they've been playing. He's a redshirt junior in his 5th season, but he didn't play at all 2019, 2020, or 2021 and had very limited snaps in 2022. Mason Garcia at least started 1 game in 2020 when Ayers was out sick with COVID and got some playing time behind him over the last couple of years. But the problem with Mason Garcia is he is not comfortable passing. And when he does, he only completes about 50% of his passes. He's really much more comfortable as a rusher, and he is actually the team's 2nd leading rusher.
It's a problem when you're not comfortable passing the ball as a quarterback.
Right.
Like that's just the epitome of what the quarterback is going to do. And in this day and age of offenses, you need a guy that can throw.
Alex Flynn, on the other hand, was described as kind of a change of pace quarterback, which I've heard that used for running backs, but not quarterbacks. But he's much more comfortable passing, but he's not much better than Mason Garcia. He just, both of them are completing about 50% of the passes. Flynn just has more attempts to get to 50%. Both of these guys have more, they both have more interceptions than touchdowns, passing touchdowns this season. Alex Flynn has 2 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. Mason Garcia has 1 passing touchdown, 2 interceptions, but he did add 2 rushing touchdowns to that. But again, they just haven't figured out this quarterback play, and until they do that, they're going to continue to struggle on offense. And to make matters worse, their offensive line only returned 1 starter. So they have an offensive line that's struggling to hold up. They have 2 quarterbacks that are struggling to pass. It's not a good combo.
But you would think, and I think this is the problem here, is that you would think that you would kind of tailor an offense around the lack of experience on the offensive line, like a quick, short passing game.
Sure.
But you don't see that. It looks like they're looking at deeper passes. Maybe that was also just against Charlotte, because Charlotte's not a very good defense, but it was just odd to me that they didn't have that. But they do have a couple weapons.
Yeah, they have 2 wide receivers that are their top 2 receivers, although, again, they're not really getting utilized very much. Chase Sowell, he's a freshman wide receiver from Humble, 6'2". He has 25 receptions for 295 yards. Jalen Johnson is a senior wide receiver, also 6'2". He has 25 receptions for 236 yards. But again, when neither of your quarterbacks is completing more than 50% of their passes, it doesn't really matter how good your wide receivers are.
I mean, you're struggling just to say nice things here because, I mean, the quarterback play, even with some of these passes, the inaccuracy is just, it really is bad.
Yeah, they also have Ray J. Harris, who is a junior running back, 76 carries for 249 yards and 4 touchdowns. Again, when you look at his rushing yards compared to Mason Garcia, it's not significantly more. On defense, brighter story. They returned 6 starters on defense. And statistically, if you look at their defense, they're actually pretty good.
They are, yeah, surprisingly.
They're certainly the strength of the team right now. They're ranked 28th with 329 yards allowed, 210 yards passing, 119 yards rushing. They allow third down conversions only about 37% of the time.
Yeah, and they're stopping offenses at a slightly better rate than UTSA's defense. I would say, though, the problem is that they get put in some bad situations because of that bad offense.
Right.
So, I mean, asking them to make more stops, it's just putting them in really bad spots.
I mean, you go back to the offensive stat that I gave you of the offense going 3 and out a third of the time, I mean, this defense is spending a lot of time on the field.
Yes, absolutely.
But here are some of those key players to look for. Jeremy Lewis, he's a senior linebacker. He's their best pass rusher, their best coverage linebacker. Julius Wood is a senior defensive back. He's leading their team in solo tackles. Got an interception against Charlotte. And then Chad Stevens on defensive line is a junior. He has 1.5 sacks, 22 tackles, and 4 tackles for loss.
It's an East Carolina defense that if it had a slightly better offense, I mean, this would be I would say a spicier matchup and something that we probably anticipated that East Carolina would be like in the summer. But man, you just gotta help out your defense some way,
right.
And they're just not. The special teams, you talked about how inconsistent they were. The kicker is 61% on field goals made this year.
Yeah, and he's sort of been really the 30s. That's kind of like his sweet spot. He's missed a field goal in the 20s. He's missed 3 field goals in the 40s. He missed a 50, just over a 50-yarder. And he's missed an extra point. So not very consistent.
Just sporadic. Like you said before when we started this preview, you've just got a team that's got so many issues in so many spots. It was hard to come up with some good things to say about East Carolina here. But I will say this defense is probably not as big of an issue. And something we have to watch out for. So let's get to the keys to victory. On offense for UTSA, yes, I talked about how good this defense was for East Carolina, but I think one of the keys is to grind them down with the 3 running back attack. One of the biggest things that you can do, especially for a defense that is pretty tough, is to keep them on the field. Mm-hmm. You just talked about one of the issues that they have is probably keeping this defense on the field too much. Welcome to San Antonio, East Carolina, because you're running into an offense that's running pretty hot right now. One that's got their rushing game going, and Frank is really just kind of feeding off of that rushing attack. He's able to essentially play action off of it and get some more time to extend drives, because he's also not really trying to chunk down the field. It goes back to some of these West Coast techniques we had, kind of shorter passes and just extending drives and keeping a defense on the field. On defense, though, UTSA needs to stay aware of these errant passes in order to create turnovers. I say that because against Charlotte, some of these passes, I just really felt like the way the UTSA defense has been playing, even when it hasn't been at its best, it's just ripe for interceptions. Mm-hmm. I mean, their quarterbacks just are not doing a very good job when it comes to delivering the ball. You highlighted it. I'm highlighting it now again because it's just not a situation where this East Carolina team can afford to be having a lot of turnovers. But I really feel like UTSA's defense can get these turnovers. So let's go to our predictions. I'll let you go first this time.
All right, the spread may only be 18, but this is a game that UTSA should run away with. There's no reason that UTSA cannot bully East Carolina, both on offense and defense. I expect to see UTSA run the ball more in this game. I'm not going to be surprised to see Robert Henry break off a long run for a touchdown. If UTSA plays well in the first half, I think we'll see Owen or Eddie or both in the second half. So I'm going to go big on this prediction.
Oh.
Give me UTSA 41-10.
Woo, look at you.
It's going to be a wonderful homecoming.
All right. On the other side, the Toves here says, this feels like a trap homecoming game. I watched ECU play, and especially against Charlotte, their offense is awful. And I've spent, I don't know how many times, and you spent right now a bit of time talking about how awful their offense is. This means there's quite a few things in UTSA's favor, which in the trailer era usually means that the score doesn't match the dominance. I expect UTSA's defense to dominate ECU's line and overwhelm their overmatched quarterbacks. I also think that this means that there's going to be opportunities for turnovers aplenty in this game. Give me about 3+ in this game from the UTSA defense. I do feel, though, that East Carolina's defense will initially cause some offensive sputtering. But even that defense can't hold on against some short fields that are going to be caused by ECU's offensive issues. I know it's not going to look like it, but UTSA would take care of business against this bad East Carolina team. Give me UTSA 34-6 over East Carolina.
Before we go, let's talk about some of the other games in the American Conference this weekend. Tulane escaped North Texas 35-28. Yes, you heard that right. Escaped North Texas. They were up 21-0 at halftime and let North Texas come back, scoring 21 points in the third quarter. I think if North Texas had been just a little bit better, they might have pulled off the upset.
They were just at times awful on third and fourth down. It didn't make sense to me, like some of the play calling. Even that last drive they had, it was on fourth down. They essentially had like two guys almost in the same spot, and Chandler Rogers threw to that area, but it just felt very North Texas because the guys like kind of fell on the ground, and the defender was able to deflect the ball, but still it just wasn't well executed, like wasn't well buttoned up. It's just North Texas still has a lot of work to do.
Right. Memphis beat UAB 45-21. Jacob Zeno was out with a concussion. They played two quarterbacks. They looked okay at first, but they ended up having 4 turnovers, 3 interceptions, and a fumble, and that's clearly a little too much to be able to overcome against a team like Memphis, even though Memphis wasn't really playing well.
The Memphis UAB game kind of reminded me of the UTSA UAB game where, UAB kind of came out with a little bit of energy, but against UTSA, they gave up that early turnover. So, UTSA got to snowball the score a little bit. Whereas with Memphis, UAB was just going shot for shot. It's just a shame there wasn't anybody for UAB to actually see them play because I think if they had more of a crowd and more energy, things might have gone a different way.
Yeah. SMU annihilated Temple 55-0. EJ Warner was out again a second week with a concussion. And the level of drop-off on quarterback play between him and I think it's Quincy Patterson, who's his backup, is it's significant.
It reminds you of the old UTSA days, right? Like you lose a starter and it was like, oof.
Yeah.
It's me having to go out there and try to dress up as quarterback, and I'm awful at quarterback at the college level, so...
And Rice had a big win over Tulsa, 42-10.
There was a just amazing touchdown throw that JT Daniels threw to Luke McCaffrey. The window is NFL level. It was incredibly impressive, and I know that the listeners aren't gonna get this, but I will say I went up to Atos and I kept going, "Let me show you how tight that window was," which she didn't appreciate, but honestly, it was. I just want to make sure that she understood, because if she sees this, she's gonna be like, "Wow, that is a great throw." And to be honest with you, the Rice game is getting a little spicier.
Yeah,
when it comes up on the UTSA schedule here in a few games. But
yeah, if JT Daniels can stay healthy, it's gonna be interesting.
And if he can get some time, he might expose UTSA's defense.
All right, let's talk a little bit about volleyball. Game 1 against Tulane, they won in 3 straight sets. Game 2 went to 4 sets, but UTSA came away with 2 victories this weekend against Tulane. That brought them to 11-11 on the season, 4-7 in conference.
Lots of good improvement. I mean, you love to see it from any of the athletic teams, but seeing some of these teams that were kind of went down and now are kind of rebounding from, some of this, just kind of being on the low ends of the conference. It's great to see.
They are on the road for their next 2 games. They play 1 p.m. on Friday against Memphis and noon on Sunday against FAU. Both games are on ESPN Plus if you get a chance to watch. Soccer tied FAU 0-0 on senior night. What a heartbreaker. UTSA had, I think, 11 shots on goal. Just not enough to make it in.
They did. They had a lot of opportunities, but as much as you keep watching this team, it just keeps getting frustrating because they're very good in their own third of the field, in the middle third of the field, but it's like once they get to the last third of the field, in the attacking area, they just don't have the precision on their passes to really set up some easy shots. And that's a shame because this team, I think, is really talented. And that was one of the things that we kind of talked about at the beginning of the year was potentially this team is going to be a lot better, which it is, but the record's not going to reflect it.
They lost to South Florida 0-1 in their last home game at Park West. With this loss, UTSA appears to be eliminated from conference tournament. They are 6-7-4 on the season, 1-4-3 in conference. They'll have an opportunity to close out their season at 6 p.m. on Thursday against Rice. That game is also on ESPN+.
The South Florida one, I will say, the goal that South Florida scored was really weak because what it really came down to was just what looked like a bad foul. I don't think it should have been called, but it was. And, UTSA's defense just they didn't keep their concentration up at the very end. So hopefully against Rice, they're able to come through with, put a few goals in and end on a high note.
All right, well, I think that about wraps it up for us on the Hail Married podcast. I'm A. Toves.
And I'm Toves.
We'll be back next week to recap our big homecoming win against ECU.
Birds up.